This is part two of our introductory video. Let's look at some of the other areas of the Mathcad ribbon. So we talked about the math ribbon, we talked a little bit about the document ribbon, and we talked about the resources ribbon. Let's look at some of the other potential that we have. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the input and output, other than just to show that you can set Mathcad up so that it will read and write Excel files, comma separated value files, ASCII text files, binary files. It's almost limitless as the type of files you can read and write in Excel. I mean in Mathcad. But let's just take a look at an easy way to get data in and out with Excel, not having to use all these special functions or anything like that. So let me enter some data into Excel. Let's say, let me have a column of 3 or 4 values. So let's say 1, 3, 5, 7. And then let's add another column. Let's say, I don't know, 5, 10, 18, and then 25. So there's an easy way to get this data from Excel into Mathcad. And so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to copy it. And now I'm just going to paste it. And so what Mathcad does is that it creates a table. So let me go over here to the matrix and the table. So another way to create a table is just to insert one. So you can determine the size and the stuff that you want, how many columns, how many rows. Or if you just directly go to Excel and paste the values in, then it gives you this table. So what I can do is that I can name this table. Let's call this, let's say this is a value of V, and let's say that maybe this is some displacement. So if I wanted to, I could go in here and put units. So I could have the displacement in, say, millimeters. And let's say I can have the, if this is a velocity vector, maybe I can have meters per second. And all I did to do that was after I typed in the M, I hit the /, which is the standard way Mathcad understands division, just like Excel does. So now I've got values. Let me move it down a little bit with my down arrow once I select it. So if I wanted to pull this data out, I can just type in V and hit the equal sign. Oops. There we go. So I have to get it down below where it recognizes it. And let me change to SI units. Okay, and so as you can see, what it does, it just creates a vector or a column matrix, however you want to call it, with the data. Let me type in U and the equal sign, and then it does the same thing with the data in the second row. So that's a very simple way to get data from Excel into Mathcad. If I wanted to, let's go up here to the matrices table. I can insert a row below my cursor. So let's go ahead and add data. Let's say 9 and 30. And then when I click outside of the region, it automatically updates my vectors in Mathcad. So let's see how easy it is to plot this data. There's 2 ways to plot data in MicroStation, in Mathcad. This particular way, this is called it's kind of a quick plot. So you would move over to the plot ribbon, and then you would insert a plot, and then I'll show you how to do that in a second. Another way is back on the math ribbon, is to insert a chart component. So let me do it the quick way, and then I'll do it the other way. So I've got a plot here. I want to insert a plot. I'm inserting an XY plot. Click the button, and there we go. So on the y-axis, let's say I want to put this vector U, and then on the x-axis, let's put the vector V, and see what happens. And there's your graph. Now I can move this over to where you normally see something like this to the left of the axis. But that's how quick it is to plot a graph in Mathcad. And you can do the same thing in Excel. You can do it very quickly. we'll show you some of the advantages that Mathcad has, especially when you start plotting functions. Um, so here's the way to do this. So let's go to the other way of doing it. Let me put my cursor somewhere and just kind of tab down. There's other ways to do that. I can create a space. I can put a page break in. I can add a page break here. That takes me down to the next one, or I can just hit my enter key until the cursor moves. So the way you move your cursor is with the mouse. I can use my up or down arrows on my keyboard, or I can hit enter, which moves it down one, or if I hit backspace, it moves it to the left one. So those are the different ways you can move around in the Mathcad environment. So let me go back to the math ribbon and let me try this chart component here. I'm going to insert a chart component. It's going to think about it for a second. And then it pulls up a little wizard that allows you to insert the stuff you want to graph. So I could go in, let me just go in and do what I just did. So I'm going to right click in the inputs area, and I'm going to insert an x-axis expression, and I'm going to call this V. And then I'm going to move my cursor over, right click, and go to a y-axis expression, and I'm going to call this U. All right, and then there's my graph. So that's pretty simple, and it's just like the way we did it the other. The only difference is I've got to put my inputs up here in this part. Now, obviously, you're not going to want that to show. So if you click that the minimize button, then it removes it from view so people don't have to see it. Double click, and it takes you to another wizard that allows you to manipulate this a little bit. So let me bring this back. So let's double click this, and I can show you what some of the things you can do here as we go back into the wizard that allows you to format. So here's the formatting wizard. Oops. I keep messing with it. All right, so I've got it moved where I want. So I can, the trace is the line. So move this over a little bit so it's easier to see. So I can add grid lines if I want on the x-axis. Just by clicking that. I can control the color. I can control the line type. And I can control the thickness. And I can do the same thing on the y-axis. Color, say I want a different color. Kind of like that line type. Let's go with a different one. So I can make it solid. So you can see you can have pretty good control of the way this stuff looks like. I can put my titles in. I can create an x-axis title, and then once I get it created, I can move it around. That's pretty simple. So there's a lot of things you can do to make your graphs look pretty and professional when you're putting together a presentation. Once you're finished with making it look like you want it to, then you can go to File, Close, and it takes you back to the main body of Mathcad with all those changes made. Again, I can close or minimize the input screen, and there you go. So that's pretty handy. So let me delete this and start all over again. Let me input another chart component. And this time, instead of graphing discrete data, let's put together a function. And let's use a function that we're all familiar with. So I'm going to right-click my mouse, and I'm going to enter an x-axis expression. And I just want that to be x. So I'll move my cursor over, right-click, and now I want a y value. And let's say that I want the sine of x. So when I click on that, that's how easy it is to graph a function into Mathcad. That would be pretty tough to do in Excel. So you have a continuous differentiable function here as opposed to just a bunch of discrete line segments like you would have in Excel. So I can take the derivative of any point in Mathcad. I can do all kind of stuff. I can integrate this automatically and find the area under the curve between any two points on the domain that I want to. It's just very powerful to do. The other thing I can do, move this up a little bit, is that I can plot another graph alongside that. So I'm going to insert another x2, let's call that x, move my cursor and insert a y value, and this time instead of saying the sine of x, let's say the cosine of x, and click out. Now I have a couple of different graphs that I can show that the difference between the function sine of x and the function cosine of x. And again, I can double click back in here and manipulate the appearance of this and make it look however I want to, adding whatever data, and then I can add other plots and put all this stuff together as I want to. So this is just a simple 2D plot that shows you how to type a function. Let me delete that and let's do it again, except I'm going to use a different function this time. So I'm going to type in a x-axis expression. I'm going to type in a y-axis expression, and my y-axis expression is say 4x plus 2. Let's see what that looks like in a graph. There you go. So that's a nice linear function. Let's say I wanted to make it non-linear. Hit the Shift 6, which is the little caret above there, and let's square it, and there we go. Again, it's very simple, very easy to graph functions. So this y sub 1 is really the same thing as f of x, or this is y equals 4x squared plus 2. The x value is just the independent variable x, and so you can see how easy it is to graph. Let me put my cursor here and make this a cubic. Okay, and so you can see some of the power of how you can draft something. And again, this is a continuous differentiable function. So I can find the derivative of the slope of that line at any point within the domain that I'm interested in looking at. And again, I can control the domain by changing the range over which the function is shown, as well as the y value numbers there. So let me, that's a quick introduction to graphing in in Mathcad. So up here I took the data that I cut and pasted from Excel, and again I can go to these input outputs, and there's a lot more fancy stuff that I can do. I can read data in from an ASCII file, I can read data in from some signal processing stuff. So these are just some of the minimal uses of cutting and pasting data from somewhere else, primarily Excel, and then manipulating the data in Mathcad in various ways. Oh, just for, let me try to show what the dot product is of these two vectors, v dot u. So that gives me a scalar, which is what you would expect. And so, again, it works just like you would expect it to. All right, let me hit Control-All and delete this, and let's look at something else. Let's look at this, the functions. There's a tremendous number of built-in functions in Mathcad. There's different ways to access those. So for example, I know, because I've used it so much, that the sine function is just the sin. So if I want to put the sine of, say, 45 degrees, let me go back to the units, and then put my degree symbol, let's say minus 30 degrees, and this time I'll just type in degree. Now if I want to divide that by 2, say, so I'm going to use my space bar until I highlight the area that I want to divide by, hit the / key, 2, and then that takes us to the result of this. So the sine of 45 minus 30 degrees over 2 is 0.5. Let me make this look in a geotext. So let's say let's make that the tangent, and then I want to make that the tangent squared. So that gives you the value that you're looking for. So let me format this value a little bit. So I go to Math Formatting, and I can change how many decimal places I want this to have. I can put a lot of decimal places in. This little box will set whether or not you have trailing zeros. And then so this little box has various different ways to show complex numbers. Um, and then the box at the top will convert this to decimal, scientific, or percentage numbers. So if I wanted to, I could set, let's set a value K, and then hit the Shift colon. And now I've got um, my K factor for lateral earth pressure if I want to. And then I can format this. I can also, if I want to have a different font, I can change the type of font and the size of the font. I have a lot of flexibility there. I just tend to use the Mathcad default. I can highlight this stuff. Um, the other thing you can do is that if I wanted to just change the number of decimal points for this particular formula, but not anything else, then I click inside the formula and then I can change it. But if I want to change everything in the spreadsheet, then I can just click outside of it, and that should change everything. Go to a decimal, and well, for some reason it's not doing that. It's supposed to do that. But anyway, if you do that, I don't know why it's not working now. It was working fine yesterday, but when you do that yesterday, then that changes the number of decimal points throughout the Mathcad template. All right, so going back to functions. So if I want to select a function, let's say I wanted a trig function. One of the easiest ways to do it is just type the trig, or I can hit this all function button, and on the left hand side it creates a drop down list of all the different types of functions that are available in Mathcad. So vessel functions, complex functions, curve fitting. There's some really powerful curve fitting tools. One of my favorite is this LOS function. That stands for a local um, weighted value function. So you can take discrete data points, use the LOS function to create a spline curve in between those points that fit that data. And then the nice thing about this particular function is that it's both continuous and differentiable. So if I had 10 or 12 data points, the LOS function creates a curve that connects all those data points, and then it's also something that you can take the derivative of or integrate it to find the area under the curve. So a lot of really, really powerful stuff in here, and we'll be talking about this in additional videos. I've got a LOS example that I want to show that's pretty powerful. Has a lot of statistical data analysis, differential equations. This has both symbolic differential equation solvers and numeric differential equation solvers. Uh, we're going to be talking about some of the other type of solvers that's in here. Um, the linear regression, nonlinear regression. There's how do you maximize a function or minimize the error in a function? How do you find the roots of various functions? Um, Really powerful set of tools is the vector array, where you can get the eigenvalues and the eigenvectors of your matrices. You can determine the rank of a matrix, the rank of even a tensor. You can find the norm of a matrix, the Kronecker delta. A lot of powerful functions that are already built into Mathcad. Um, some of the interpolation and prediction I was talking about. So you can do a linear interpolation, a B-spline interpolation. You can do a lot of logarithmic functions. Here are some of the functions that'll convert things in temperatures and time and degrees, minutes, and seconds into various types of formats. Um, Probability distribution, there's quite a few distributions in here. The Weibull the uniform distribution, the binomial, the normal distribution. Um, you have random number generators, signal processing, and then here's our trigonometric functions. So all these functions are right here. So for example, if I wanted to create a variable, say A, or let's call it alpha. So I hit the A and then Control G, and that converts it to a Greek letter. I'm going to say, okay, alpha. So when I insert a function, it also has a placeholder for the arguments. So for here, the argument is, let's say it's, let me copy this, 45 degrees, Control Copy, Control V for insert, and equals, and that gives me the cosine of 45 now as a variable in radians. If I wanted to change that to degrees, I just type in my unit sign here, select it, and there we go. Converts it to degrees. I can change the number of decimal points if I want to. So powerful stuff. So these are all the built-in functions that Mathcad has. And I'll also show you how to create your own function. So you can do a local definition of a function in Mathcad as well, and we'll be talking about that. You can use a program. So you can write a program and have that act as a function. So that's some of the things we'll be talking about in the future. All right, so matrices are very important in math. Let me create a matrix, let's call it M, and then I'll hit the Shift colon, and I'm going to assign the values of a matrix. Let's just say a 2 by 2 matrix. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4. Now let's say that I wanted to pull out, so we saw when we did the table that I was just able to put headers in there and it knows which vectors it is, but let me do it this way. Let's say that I wanted to pull out this this component, this number 1 here. Well, let me show you some other ways. Before we do that, let me just show you some basic matrices stuff here. So let's say I want to do the transpose of this matrix. So I M, let's look at a operator, and let's go to the transpose. And now if I hit my equal sign, you can see that it's transposed the matrix for me. So let's pull values out, for example. So the way we do that, let me create a vector. Let's call the vector V. Hit the Shift colon, and let's do this as a column vector. And so let me tell it what the components are. So I'm going to type in M, and then I'm going to hit the little, so there's a key next to your P key on your keyboard. There's a button, a key that shows you 2 different type of braces. So let me hit the first one to a left brace, and that shifts it down to an index number. So right now the default for Mathcad is that our indices for matrices start at 0. But let's say I want to change that. If I type in 1, comma 1, that says, okay, this is the first row, first value, and then for the second value in M, so I hit my little square bracket key that takes me to a subscript. Let's go 2, comma 1. And if I hit my equal sign, it gives me an error message. So let me figure out what I did wrong here.